Welcome to the Media Nerds Podcast. I'm Dan Vedebonker.
And I'm Kenton Larson.
And Kenton, before we get into the topic of radio, which we're going to do, we got our annual, you left this on my desk, an annual article from the Globe and Mail about how radio is staying resilient despite many challenges. So we're going to look at this article and talk about the realities of it. And I think what some things that's misleading it's saying about this. But before we get there, I wanted to ask, you said there was a special look of Andor on Disney Plus. I did not have a chance to look at it before I came on here. So what does it do? Like, what does it say?
Well, it's different. It's different scenes. You probably should watch it. You probably should. Do you want to watch it quickly? Because you know what?
No.
You weren't a fan of last week's with Steve Earle, but I think you will be a fan of
this
this
Let's save it for
week.
Next week's Star Wars nerds. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to get on there. I just was asking you because I thought I'd just get your quick impressions from it.
What I'm going to say is I think that what they did was they made two kinds of trailers. They made the Steve Earle trailer for a little more punk rock action and energy, and then they made a more classic Star Wars first look. And the two things show different stuff from Andor, but the tones are completely different. Huh. I think that the first look in some ways is better than that first trailer, but I still love the first trailer.
So you're saying that
we'll save it for Star Wars nerds, but I do believe you will like the new first look much more than you like the trailer.
Yeah, but is it going to cancel out the anger that I feel when I think about that first one? Because I don't like it. I still don't like it when I think about it.
I think that's one of the best Star Wars trailers. I really do. And I don't know why you would be angry about writing on the about a little writing on the trailer. I don't get it.
I think it was over the top and it was too much. And it was dumbed down for a larger audience. And I don't like that. I want them to focus on our audience, focus on the people who love Star Wars first, then make that stuff for the bigger audience. They should have done the first look first if they're going to do it that way. But anyway.
I think what they wanted to do was simply make it like, HBO's premium cable. They want the message out there. This is a premium show.
Yeah,
on Disney Plus, not on HBO, on Disney Plus.
I don't get that vibe from that show. I just get the Star Wars vibe from it. It's just Star Wars. There's no like premium anything. It's Star Wars, right? Like it's
it's a higher level of Star Wars than the other streaming shows. I think it's safe to say. Like the stormtroopers in the field. That's like higher quality filmmaking. There's no doubt. Just all of it. Just like as a filmmaking exercise, it's better. And I have friends who aren't interested in Star Wars who say to me, Andor's the best Star Wars. Like, I think that's where that comes from. That approach in the trailer comes from. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll watch it. We'll talk about it next week.
Filmmaker Sean Garrity said to me, who I didn't think I thought he was done with Star Wars. And he's like, wow, that Andor, is that pretty much the best Star Wars ever made? I was like, wow, didn't expect to hear that from him whatsoever. Like he's not a guy I talk about Star Wars with usually, so that was a big surprise. So I think that might be it. It's just I just think it's of higher quality of filmmaking, and it reminds me of when HBO has a truly great show where somebody hangs on to every moment of the show, super compelling. I just think it's got a lot of that to it. Whereas Skeleton Crew was a fun romp, but it wasn't like you're trying to absorb every last second of the show. Mm-hmm. It's a little different.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to it next week. I'll watch it and then we'll react to it. This week, I want to talk to you about this article. Canadian radio stays resilient in the face of challenges. The medium's future is unclear, but local stations are getting creative to remain on the air. And so this is from the Globe and Mail. I take issue with this article, Kenton. It's misleading. What do you mean by resilient? Yeah. You mean not shutting down? Is that what that means? Because that's what's happening. They're not shutting down, so they're resilient.
That's why I brought it to you and left it on your desk with a little Post-it note. Because when I read it, I knew that you'd have that to say about it for sure. But I also know my least favorite cliche from guest speakers is a lot of people are talking smack about blank, but what I say is there's never been a better time to work in blank. And usually it's absolute bullshit designed to self-reward the person for taking the career that person continues to be in.
Hmm.
And sort of like I'm reminding myself how inspirational it is to be in this career. And so that we've never been more resilient is what they say about people in any place with a terrible disaster or a war or something horrible. The people of Boston are very resilient.
That's
The
right. That's
people
right.
of, it's usually just empty words designed to make people feel stronger in a terrible situation.
One of the issues I have with this article is that it kind of frames it all around this on-air personality, Shannon Burns,
Hmm.
who's on the air for Virgin Radio. And it talks about now, it talks about as a teenager, she went to see the Backstreet Boys, da 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 da. She kind of they tie it back to the Backstreet Boys in the end. It's all very cute. But what I want to point out is that Shannon Burns, her job took away 10 jobs. Her job as a syndicated on-air host where she's out of Toronto, but she's broadcast across Canada and every major market in Canada on Virgin Radio. There used to be 10 people doing those jobs in every city across Canada, right? That's not happening anymore. And that is happening across the board with radio. The only consistently local show still in radio is the morning show. That's the only one that and even then it's not local here. Kiss 1023 Kiss FM is a syndicated morning show. Roz and Mocha. I was actually listening to them this morning when I was in an Uber. And you can't really tell it's in Toronto. I'll be honest. Like it does sound like any normal goofy radio show, but they're still shrinking. They're still not like there's nobody hiring anybody. There's no growth in this
Yeah.
industry. There's like they've kind of cut it off. And everybody who's working in radio is just staying in radio, and there's nobody moving around or anything. They're all just kind of clinging on to their jobs and hoping for the best.
Yeah, by the way, I taught Roz, but I don't think I taught Mocha.
Oh, is Roz a grad? I didn't know that.
I think so. If Roz is who I think Roz is. I
Okay.
won't say the person's name because when you go into radio, you change your name,
You
and
do.
the last thing you want is to be
That should be a
reminded
red
of what
flag.
you don't want to be reminded of your original horrible civilian name. You you have a new name now.
I'm kind of curious about Mocha's name. That doesn't seem like
Yeah.
an appropriate name, but anyway.
No,
Um,
and it doesn't seem it sounds like a name that someone wouldn't want to be called.
exactly. But anyway, but that is happening. It's syndicated.
Yeah.
It's people, and the technology, of course, is allowing them to still interact with your audience. You can still say, "Text me at this number." People in Winnipeg can text into Toronto, no problem. All that still happens. So it does kind of replicate the experience. Now, it does address the fact that listenership is dropping like crazy. Radio is
Yeah.
experiencing. Everybody I've talked to says is experiencing a bit of an upswing because numbers are up from the pandemic, but they're still down from before the pandemic, and I don't think they're ever going to come up to those levels because people have they've moved on. There are new habits formed here, and now they're listening
Yeah.
to Spotify to get their music. They're not going to the radio. It used to be that the radio was like your number one choice. If you wanted to hear a song before buying the album, you went to the radio to listen, and it would pop up, and you would hear it. Okay, and then you go buy the album if you liked it. Now,
Yeah.
just search it up on Spotify and listen to it. There isn't even any purchase of involved in that, but
The
you don't
whole
need the
yeah.
radio.
The whole link between radio station and going to buy music is completely broken. All of it. The entire path from hearing the song to buying the song is no longer like that used to be the only way that you could actually sell music
Yeah.
was to get it played on the radio, which is where also a lot of abuse came in terms of trying to get artists to pay to be on the radio, also known as the payola scandal. That's where that came from. When I was actually a college student, I interviewed the Canadian band, the Payolas.
Hmm.
Remember that band?
Yeah,
Eyes
yeah.
of a Stranger and whatever. And they ended up changing their name to Paul Hyde and the Payolas. And I remember they said that choosing the name the Payolas actually hurt their radio airplay because of course it conjured up memories of the payola scandal, which was just trying to milk money from artists to get radio play.
Right.
So maybe an ill-advised name, but they got lots of airplay in Canada because they're Canadian band and we have a Canadian content rule.
Yes, and that
Yeah.
rule has been responsible for like great
Oh,
music, and I think it's
yeah.
been an important rule in Canadian media. Like we force I tell you, broadcasters absolutely hate it. They hate being, and they hate any rules basically. But you have to play 30% Canadian content, so 30% of your, and that actually is talked about in this article. They talk about the maple, although I was mistaken. I thought the P in maple stood for producer, but it is apparently a performance. So if it's a Canadian, if it's performed in Canada, that makes it Canadian content. So if you're like a U2 performing a song and it's recorded live in Toronto, that would be Canadian content, even though it's an Irish band.
Hmm.
Um, it also quotes Alan Cross, History of New Music.
Oh, he's coming to the Park Theater to do a seminar.
Oh, interesting. On
Yeah,
what?
yeah. Hang on, let me tell. I think he said I saw a little thing. I saw him the last time he came to town. It was quite good, and he's got lots of opinions and thoughts about music. But he also, I'm just Googling it while I talk to you. One second. But he also, I think, so he sort of has it's like a live podcast, I think, when he comes here. Hang on, let me tell you when this is. It's Saturday, April 5th. He's coming in at the Park Theater, and there's limited seats available.
Okay. I'm
And
not
it's
going to
good,
go
but
see it.
it's well, he has thoughts like, and I think he takes questions and stuff. And he's also been like, he talks music, politics. He's Canadian. He talks about being Canadian. He's got a roster of things he talks about, and I think he takes questions, et cetera, et cetera.
He says in this, radio is the cockroach of media. Corporations tried to kill it many times, but it always comes back and stays. Corporations didn't try to kill it. Corporations messed it up. Corporations couldn't figure out how to make money off of it. So they've screwed it up and just like in the case of Bell sold off like 50 of their stations. This talks about how now this also talks about how a company in BC, Vista Radio, bought 20 out of the 50 stations or whatever that Bell Media sold off, and now has is going all in on those stations, but it doesn't tell us any details of that. It doesn't tell us any information about what they're actually doing in that company. Like, I really want to know what's happening in BC. If that company bought 20 of those stations, how are those stations doing? We have no information about that in this piece.
Then
So I
they
don't like
shut
that.
them down, probably. It's like the oldest story in the
Well, they
world.
said they wouldn't. They no, that's the thing. They said they wouldn't. They said they're not laying anybody off. They're keeping everybody in their jobs. They're keeping all the stations. They're keep them and make them profitable. Basically, they're saying they're going to make these stations profitable.
Right. That's
Um,
called a value investment, but it doesn't always work out.
Right. The other person quoted here is somebody from CKUA, which is a nonprofit radio station in Calgary. And I have to say, nonprofit stations are a completely different animal. It's like not even the same thing. They don't have to worry about selling advertising. They just have to ask people for donations and they can get it. And this one did. This one talks about having a successful Indiegogo campaign and they raised enough money to save the station. Awesome. And the beauty of having a radio station and a nonprofit radio station is that you don't really need a lot to run a radio station these days. I have enough right here, Kenton, to run a radio station. I have a microphone and a computer, and that's really all you need. You don't need any of the fancy equipment anymore. So, what the hell's the problem here? I don't understand. Like, I just, it frustrates me. This is just a completely misleading article. There are so many fewer people working in radio now than there was 10
Oh
years
yeah.
ago. Like, I want to say the industry has shrunk in half, cut in half, at least as far as jobs
Easily.
are concerned.
Easily.
And I can't like, so we're gonna have a conversation. I do tell students, if you want to work in radio, here's how you do it. Get a job at whatever Summer Street team. They hire the Summer Street team. If you make an impression there, you can move into the on-air position. That's generally what they do. And I'm just happy to feed into that with our first year students, but we're not training anybody to be on the air in this program, in our program. We're not training anybody to be on the radio anymore. That's not a skill that our students want,
Yeah.
right?
And from the advertising standpoint, there's a couple things that we used to do that we don't do anymore. I used to march all the students through. I didn't do it every year, but from some years I did, where you take all the students for the big walk through the radio station to meet everybody working there, and everybody would be excited because all the on-air personalities were local stars then. So it'd be fun to meet them. We'd go to the advertising writers room, I remember, and you'd go into the room and there was like 8 people writing ads, like the bullpen
Yeah.
kind of thing, and and kind of like, oh, they haven't seen the light of day in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
they're just cranking out these ads. So that was always fun. And it was just sort of like this. And I did a work placement there when I was in college, actually, at a radio station, for one of my work placements. And it was sort of like a place where you could go and you could still sort of be alternative media in a way. It was still people, the DJ chose the music. And it still said something about the DJ based on what you were hearing. It wasn't some corporate playlist or anything like that. And I think at a certain point, the return on the investment became less so, where it became hard to march 80 students through a place where there's only 30 people working. Like it just the numbers just didn't add up and it became harder to do that stuff. But also the interest in young people just wasn't there. And of course, remember I think I told you the story before where I brought in the media planner from McKim,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or now Show and Tell agency, then McKim. And this was like 10 years ago. And she comes in and talk to the class and she goes, "Well, I know for people your age, radio's dead, so I won't bother talking about that." And just like
She
dropped
was
a
right. She
bomb.
was absolutely right. Like,
Right.
and
Right.
back
Oh,
then
of
even
course. Yeah,
it
yeah.
was,
She
and
was
that,
totally right. Yeah.
but the problem is it's not like it's not the content that's the problem. Like, oh, I would say they're trying to kind of, you know, jump off the popularity of music. Music in itself is like separating itself from radio. I think that's kind of been radio's thing is like, hey, we're gonna give this music to you for free, but you have to listen to our ads. Now these days, people can just get it for free anywhere. So that's changed. But the other thing is that radio is also not willing to go outside of its own medium for anything. That's one thing I talked about. So for this, I'm having students right now come up with a new radio station brand. They have to come up with a new station for Winnipeg. They have to come up with a format and brand and give it a name and give it a target audience and stuff. And part of that is an ad. I'm asking them to create an ad. And someone's asking, does it have to be a video ad or an audio ad? And I said, well, it's just an audio ad for class, but generally it would be a TV ad because you don't hear stations advertising on other stations. No radio station would advertise itself on a competitor, right? They're not going to give money to
Right.
their competitors. They never will do that. And I think that even goes to the fact that one radio station company also owns a lot of the billboards in our city.
Yeah.
And I think those other stations don't want to give that company any money either. So they're not advertising
No.
as much as they used to. So there's that is changing as well.
Wow. I mean, advertising media on other media has always been a weird thing to me, but I even find it weird when you see a TV ad for a radio
I
station.
don't. I think that's a perfect place to advertise it.
Well, I guess in some ways it is, but in other ways, like shut off the TV and listen to us.
No, no, no. That's not what they're saying. They're
No, I
saying, okay,
know,
for
I know.
example, I was talking to a mutual friend where they were saying that they have an ad for their station they want to run on streaming services. They want to run it on
Yeah,
Netflix and Disney Plus and the new streaming services. And it's just a 15-second spot. Your typical like music mix ad where they just play some clips from the songs and it's
yeah,
pretty basic, but that's all they want to run. And the whole point of it is just to say, hey, tomorrow morning when you're driving into work, check us out. That's all they're saying. Right.
yeah.
And so they're not trying to tell you to turn off the TV. They're just trying to suggest that you check out the radio station later. So that's how they should market themselves. But anyway,
Yeah, but
it's not happening very much.
I like buying one media to advertise another. It's fine. It seems to be just a little bit of a confession about
Well,
which
but
is the
unless
media doing the work here.
now I ask you this: the company that owns the media, all the media is Pattison, which owns radio stations here and
Yeah,
also billboards. And of course, because of that, they have so many. They have the bus wraps, right? They have all those bus wraps all over the
yeah.
city. And then they also have a lot of billboards. And so that they very much, like I would say, oversaturated in this market as far as advertising goes. Do you think people realize that that's why there are so many ads, or do you think they just don't notice?
I don't think people know.
No,
I don't think people know why that's the case. Our students don't know that's the
I
case.
pointed it out to them, and they were like,
Okay.
"Oh." So yeah, I guess
Okay. Well, but I mean, they don't come into our program knowing that that's
no,
the
they don't.
case, and
No,
they're interested in jobs in the media.
yeah.
I think a general audience just wouldn't.
Huh.
I wouldn't know or probably wouldn't care.
I
One
just
or the
notice
other.
it so much, and I see those
Yeah.
all over the place, and I'm like, I would be so sick of this station by now. But maybe it's just because I notice that stuff. I don't know.
What I find more or what I shouldn't say more. What I find despicable is seeing editorials in our media that are only there because the person with the editorial buys ad space.
Oh, well, yeah.
That to me is where we flip over and it becomes something else. It's actually polluting the clarity of the communications.
Right. And that's happening all over. That's
Yeah,
something they did at CTV. They would
of
have
course.
paid during their morning show. And I was surprised at how obvious it was and how blatant it was. But I guess they have to be. I guess that's the rules.
It
They have to
should
be.
be. It should be
Yeah.
blatant,
But
but it's
it
getting
does
less and
it
less.
rings so false when it's
Yeah.
like that. It feels so like forced and like just awful. Like honestly, I would have to post these every once in a while. because I was in news, so they didn't generally come to me. But every once in a while, they're like, "Oh, this one's kind of newsworthy. Put this in the feed." So I would have to go in and edit that video of like this segment of these two real estate guys talking to the host about
Right.
the real estate market in Winnipeg. I'm like, "What the fuck are you guys talking about? It's a mess." And how could you not think it's a mess right now? Like it's
Yeah.
anyway.
It's
Like
always the real estate market in Winnipeg. That's number one thing to watch out for. Sometimes it's somebody from a car dealership.
yes, yes, that's right.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Well, those
It's
two
like, yeah.
those two areas spend a lot of on
Oh,
advertising,
yeah.
and they do
Yeah.
spend a lot in on radio. They still spend a lot, and you still see like I think that's something that we should consider as well is that these some of these industries are kind of holding up radio and keeping it in business. If it wasn't for the
Yeah.
car industry, there would be no like they wouldn't have any money. Like the car dealerships are still advertising there. You still get lots of national advertisers like McDonald's and Subway and those big brands are just kind of like blanket everything, right? They're just advertising everywhere, so radio is a part of that. Um, but you don't hear a lot of local stuff. Like again, the more I listen, the less I hear local. If it is local, it's like a nonprofit that didn't
Yeah.
actually pay for that ad, or it's an ad for the station itself. It's an ad for another show or for their music or something like that. So less and less local advertising on radio. So what do you think? Do you think they're writing this with like the corporate manager who is going to be buying their like this is what is this Globe and Mail? Who owns Globe and Mail?
I don't know who owns it now, to tell you the truth. Good
And
question.
do they also own a radio station? Is my question. Like do they also own Virgin Radio? I don't think they do. That's Bell. I don't think the Globe and Mail is owned by Bell. But the problem is like it's all very insular. It's all very like, everything's
Oh,
great. Everything's gonna be fine. Radio's still gonna be around. That's very much
mm,
the tone of this, and I don't think that's true. I think in the next 10 years we're gonna see a lot of these stations shut down and they're just gonna like and I mean, people will make a big stink about it. People will be upset and they'll cry and be upset, but it'll go away. Like already, we've seen a bunch of them shut down. All the ones that shut down from the Bell Media layoffs last year or the year before, whenever that was, people cried and now they've forgotten about it. So that's going to happen for all this other stuff, and we're going to have fewer and fewer private media companies. Like the CBC will still go as long as we have a favorable government in place that continues to fund it. But other than that, these other companies, I'm afraid, are failing.
Globe and Mail is owned by Woodbridge, the investment arm of the Thompson family. So Thompson
Oh,
Media, which of course has been around
Oh, that does
forever.
they do own CTV. Damn it, they do own Bell Media.
Yeah,
Damn it, you're right. So they're
yeah,
there. They're promoting their own radio station.
that's
They
right.
are.
Where's the
Huh.
there? Of course, there's a disclaimer on the article, right? Of course
No, there
not.
is not. I guarantee you there is
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
But we used to have to do that sometimes at
Disclosure,
CTV.
not disclaimer, disclosure. That's
Yeah.
what it's called.
There
Yeah,
would be sometimes we would have to do that on the articles on CTV if it
yeah,
was like
yeah,
certain things. I can't remember what a specific one, but
yeah.
anyway, this is kind of a mess. I don't know. I'll link to this. I don't. Oh yeah, they'll be behind a paywall, so you won't be
It
able to read
will
it.
be.
So
I I have a subscription to
how about I
Globe
take a
and Mail.
photo of this article and post it underneath our podcast?
You should. Yeah, you should. I have a subscription to Globe and Mail, and every day I think I get a little closer to I need to cancel this. And today I was watching City Hall unfold, and there's a raging debate about the development of LeMay Forest. Okay, and
Oh
I,
yeah.
I was, well, hey, I got another item agenda coming up later, so that I was sort of watching that, waiting for my agenda item to come up. And what I have to say, what surprised me about the hearing is once in a while the city councilor would say to the person presenting, the member of the public presenting, they go, "Did you see so and so's article in the Winnipeg Free Press on this topic?" And then the person goes, "Oh no, I canceled my subscription when I didn't agree with the editorial slant or whatever." And they're like, "Oh, okay, here's what the article says." But that happened four times. Like everybody
Really?
just kept going. Yes, everyone just kept going. Nah, I canceled my subscription. I was like, wow, what's going on here? It seems it. I just think it's part of a general, um, and I think it's true when you live in a community and you read the news about the supposed news about what's going on in your community, and it makes you angry. It's true. You do want to pull the plug on the media outlets. So, but I just thought I think people are more motivated now to do things like that. To understand. I think people never really understood where news came from. And I think now that people understand it more, they don't like it. And so pulling the plug more. But I mean, it goes back to what's the least believable part of the news? It's the weather because everybody can check it for themselves. But what about everything else that they can't check for themselves? Well, that's probably bad too,
Right. Um,
because a person did it. I mean, it's a flawed person by definition who reports the news.
Yeah, and the problem is like with radio is that they're not even trying to charge you for it. They're just it's
No.
like giving it away for
Yeah.
free. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing that the newspapers never understood was it's not about the cost of the newspaper. It's about like giving this. They should also be giving it away for free. But even when
Yeah.
radio's doing that, they can't make, they can't sell advertising. They can't create the live stream desirable enough that it's worth putting advertising on. I've thought recently that I think radio stations should be live streaming on YouTube and all of they should be live streaming on TikTok. Like every platform allows for a live stream, a radio station should be on that because every person that's listening to that stream, even if they're not like listening to the actual station, they're still hearing the stream, they're still hearing the advertising within the stream, and that counts as a impression, right?
Yeah.
That's how I would think of it. But they do not, again, they do not want to give any money to YouTube. They don't want to give any money to anybody else. So they refuse to. They refuse to post their content to YouTube and TikTok. I do this. Oh my God. I'm worried that this is going to get back to my old boss at CTV, but whatever. If it does, I'll live with it. Every time CTV National posts on TikTok, they only have a national account, CTV News. They don't have an individual account for any cities in Canada. Every time they post something that's a Winnipeg, I see Marilee Caruso there talking about something from Winnipeg. I post, I want a Winnipeg TikTok account, please, CTV. Like I say that every time. So hopefully they'll do it because they need to be making this stuff. They need to be putting this stuff on TikTok where people are, where people already are. You can't expect them to come to you. You have to go to where they are. And that's radio's problem too. They're trying to expect people to come to them
Yeah.
on their place, the one place where you can listen to the radio, right? And they don't want to do that. People don't want to do that. So radio's struggling.
It's not hard to do that either. It's not hard.
Yeah,
It's not hard to make that happen because every individual on earth can make it happen.
right.
So why can't
And
this?
that's what
Yeah.
frustrates me about all this stuff is all this radio talk about like how it's going to stick around and all these
Yeah.
things people are doing to make it survive. None of it has to do with improving the content. None of it seems to like acknowledge how annoying some of this is, how awful the ads are, how like the format doesn't seem to work anymore. People don't like the talking a lot of the time. They just want to listen to music. There's all kinds of things that need to change about radio, and
Yeah.
nobody seems to want to do it. I think they
No.
should get rid of the commercial break. It is a horribly useless piece of thing. It's a money pit for people who put their money into radio. Like do the sponsored stuff on sponsored news, sponsored weathers, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, but don't do any more 30-second ads or shorten it up. Make it a 1 minute break or a minute and a half, just like I get now on Tubi or Plex. It's no more than 2 minutes if I'm in a commercial break. It's just
Yeah.
shorten and out, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's content marketing.
Yeah. Right.
Give people something useful or entertaining or both. Don't give them the interruption.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, that's what we're talking about in my class right now, an
Yeah.
advertising class. We've made the jump from paid interruptions to owned destinations.
Ah, okay.
And I always say to them, and so we're going to be looking at in our next class, we're going to look at paid YouTube ads and paid TikTok ads, which you can do. Or you can just create great content and people will start to find it. It's a slower process. Why not just create some great content?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we try to do every single day on TikTok, right? So
Absolutely.
I don't see why that's not possible. But I think old habits die hard, old media dies hard
Yeah.
as well. And so and I think you mentioned that old media, they're so set in their ways, it's hard to get them to do anything. Like
Very much so.
even starting a podcast is like a
Yeah.
bridge too far.
Yeah, I could not get anybody on board with that idea over there. And I couldn't get anywhere. Even when I tried emailing head office, I couldn't get anywhere either. So yeah. Okay, let's leave it there. We'll see where we'll check back in next year as we do, see if
Yeah.
radio's still around. Let's do recommendations. What have you been watching this week?
Well, what should I recommend? I'm going to recommend on looking at my big list of 10 billion things that I do every week. I keep a master list for every year, by the way, of
Hmm.
everything I watch or read or whatever. Okay, here's one. CBC Gem. How about that? I almost never get a chance to recommend something streaming there. And by the way, the ads continue to be terrible. They continue to be repetitive and inserted incorrectly so that the show starts to fade. Boo, the ad runs, and you come back and it's still fading out before it starts again. Makes me crazy. Um, but I watched a show called Alma's Not Normal. ALMA. Alma's Not Normal. It's a British show. It's only 2 seasons. The last season was last November, and it is hilarious. It tackles complicated issues, but yet in a very hilarious, fun way. Alma, the main character, is not normal, but Alma's family is not normal, and it's ultimately shows how a not normal person can be victorious, even when even when the cards are stacked against you. You
Oh,
can still be victorious. It's really a lovely show. So and I found myself surprised at just how much it resonated and how good it was. And there's some amazing performances on that show. And like, how do you play a mentally ill person and you're still so you have mental challenges, but you're hilarious.
hmm.
Like that's a real hard brief for an actor, and yet you watch that show, that's great stuff.
Interesting. Well, I'll check it out.
That's
CBC Gem.
Alma,
Yeah, I like
ALMA. Yeah,
there's a few good things on Gem, and I will
yeah,
put up with the ads. I think that's pretty
yeah.
normal
I
as
will
far as
too.
like they're not able to time it out. I noticed that when I watch Perfect Strangers, is that when they the ads are always off, and they always have to.
Yeah,
I think because of the software always rewinds it a little bit, so that's just kind of part of it. That's just a normal thing they do, and so that
yeah.
doesn't fit with television when there's like breaks built into it, right?
Brutal.
Um, okay, well, I'm going to do a not recommendation. I'm going to not recommend that you watch The Gorge on Apple
Oh,
TV Plus.
I have not watched it. I will not, but you are one of many saying the same thing.
Okay, well, this is a funny one. I just finished watching it. I was like, why not? Like, I like science fiction. I will try any science fiction, and there's a lot of good science fiction on Apple TV Plus as far as their series go. There's a few good series there, but this one it starts out being kind of interesting. The premise is there's this gorge, and it's just the word itself. The word
There's this
itself.
gorge.
It was in gorge. No, there was this gorge. There's this mysterious gorge with like a fog. You can't see what's down there, and then Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy are like sentries. Basically, they're both like sharpshooter sentries or snipers, and so they've been stationed there by either side of the east and west from the Cold War. This is something that dates back to the Cold War, and so there's just a series of sentries being placed on this wall or in this gorge to prevent what's in there from getting out. They're not there to stop anything from going in. They're there to prevent the stuff that's in there, the bad stuff that's in there, from getting out of the gorge. So, of course, within about a day of them both being stationed, and they're stationed there for a year. So they're supposed to be there for a full year, watch the gorge, and then they get out of there and someone else comes in. And so within like a day of them being there, they're told, don't talk to the person across. Don't talk to the person over there. That's the enemy. We're not talking to them. We're just here to guard the gorge. So within a day, they're sending each other notes. They're like messaging, like writing things. It's like writing on a thing and holding it up while the other person looks through binoculars. Like that's the thing. And so there's a bit of a meet cute in that sense. Like that, a good chunk of the
Oh,
movie is them like going back and forth
horrible.
like that. It's so
Horrible.
bad.
And I heard that he takes the zip line so they can have sex.
That's right. He zips on over
Yes.
there. He zips on over there so they can have sex. Uh,
Thank what's
and
that? What's that? Day two?
That's right. That was day two. And then they discover the secret of the gorge, which is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Military experiment gone wrong. Like, what else is it going
Of
to be?
course.
And so you get down there, and the only thing I really liked was like some of the design stuff was kind of cool. You get down there, and it's like this kind of Lovecraftian horrors of like things. It kind of like was that movie with Natalie Portman. Remember the one where like they were going to the barrier? What was that one called? And they had to walk into that barrier, and there's that zone where everything's going weird. Shoot. Anyway,
You got me. That sounds
anyway,
like Westworld.
it is, and it's a very weird. It's got a very weird vibe, some good production design, but overall the gore. And by the end of it, I'm like, what the fuck? This is so stupid. Like for a minute there, I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. But by the end of it, you're like, this was ridiculous. It's a dumb movie. Do not watch The Gorge. It was awful.
Yeah, I watched a couple YouTubers review it just for the laughs, and they hated it too. It just seems like it's. But it's got legitimate stars in it, so you think maybe this is going to be better than average or cooler, but then it just falls into the standard tropes, it sounds like.
There's a scene where they're playing chess across the way, like she's doing. I'm
Yeah.
like, they got to make some kind of joke here about like
Yeah.
her because she was famous for being a chess player in another show.
Of
Nothing.
course.
Nothing. They're not going to acknowledge Netflix. Editor's note. Hi, it's Dan. I'm here. I'm editing the podcast. And I got to this part and I remembered that they were making a joke in the movie. And I totally didn't clue into it because I've never seen Whiplash. And I forgot that Miles Teller was in Whiplash, in which he drums. And there was a part in The Gorge when he's drumming and then she was drumming on one side and then they're both playing chess. So they were making jokes about their previous things they were in. And I totally freaking missed it. Anyway, back to the podcast. I do continue to enjoy Apple TV Plus for another month and a half. Slow Horses. Slow Horses is freaking amazing.
The best.
That is. Has Gary Oldman won any awards for that?
Yes, he has. He has.
Okay.
I believe he's
BAFTAs.
and also, oh, what's the one Ricky Gervais used to host? I can't think of
Golden
it.
Globes.
The Golden Globes, right?
Yeah.
They always thank the Hollywood. No, what is it again? The Foreign
Hollywood
Press.
Foreign
That's
Press,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. So the Golden Globe, I believe he got a Golden Globe for that, maybe an Emmy too.
Well, that's a
But
great
yeah,
show.
Slow Horses is the best thing on Apple TV Plus. There's no, I just that never takes a dip in terms of quality. It's always top notch, surprising, great acting. Yep, I love it. And my iPhone gets shittier by the day, so I'm probably a year away or less from getting my free Apple TV Plus again and catching up on Slow Horses, Bad Sisters, Severance, and the Silo.
So the Silo, Silo is really good. So you don't feel like you're missing out on Severance right now because it's a big thing, or you're just kind of tuning that out? Because they're really trying to make it seem like Severance is the show to watch right now. Like I'm getting a lot of that stuff in my feed, and
I'm not actively tuning it out, but it's not been spoiled. A friend of mine texted me this morning and said, "I'm sick of people spoiling Daredevil." And I was like, "I haven't seen a single one. I haven't seen any spoilers." And I'm like, "I'm going to watch it this weekend." "Whoa, you better do it quick." I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so. I think I'm okay." I've seen nothing about it, so I hear it's good. Daredevil, I hear it's good, so I'm gonna watch that. I've given all up on Marvel, but if something's good, I'll see it.
We'll see. We'll keep giving it a chance until they really burn us.
Well, they have really burned us many times in the past, and that's why I didn't bother with Captain America. Did you see Captain America?
No, I've not seen it. That's gonna do it for this episode of the Media Nerds. I'm Dan Vadabonker.
I'm Kenton Larson. Don't let the door at the radio station hit you on the ass.